Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to our alumni community who are joining us from all around the globe today for this webinar, Letting Go and Looking Forward. And as I mentioned to those who joined a little bit early, I hope you enjoyed the insight to the behind the scenes. My name's Adam Gillis. I'm the Alumni Engagement Manager at Heriot-Watt University, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to today's session. So thank you all for joining us. Before we begin, I'd just like to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So we have switched off all attendees' microphones and videos just to avoid any disturbance on the call. However, we do highly encourage you to use the chat box and the question and answer facility to raise any questions you might have, and also to partake in some of the interactive questions that will be raised by today's speakers. A reminder that this session will be recorded and we will email you a link to watch back at a convenient time. So we are delighted to have hundreds of alumni register for this webinar, and we're really keen to know where you're all joining from today. So if you'd like to share, please feel free to let us know which country you're joining from in the chat box now. This session really came about as a result of reflecting on the unprecedented challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic that was brought to us all in 2020. And today, really, we want to consider how we can try and reset ourselves and our goals for 2021. So whatever your current situation, whether you're in lockdown or you're working from home, or if you have new changed perspectives about your values or your life, we hope this session will enable you to explore some of the lessons learned from 2020 and to provide some strategies for helping build resilience for the future. It should be mentioned that this session should not be taken as professional advice for any individual set of circumstances, but that we hope that you'll be able to take away some general tools that you can utilize in the future yourselves. And we will be talking about well-being and mental health. And if you feel you do need some specific professional medical support in that area, then we'd recommend you talk to your own doctor. That being said, I would like to hand over to our wonderful speakers. So today we have Prathna Singh, who's a clinical psychologist, and Resha Erheim, who's a clinical counsellor. Both are part of the Wellbeing Service at Heriot-Watt's Dubai campus. They've both worked in international contexts, addressing mental health and wellbeing issues. And they've provided numerous presentations and outreach activities, and are really looking forward to supporting our alumni through this session and answering any questions that you might have. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to the presenters, and Resha, I will help when it comes to the questions, and I'll read some of those answers out to you when you prompt me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Thank you for that introduction. What we're going to do is we're going to just start off by, so yes, thank you. So I am Prathna Singh, and I'm here with my colleague Resha, and it's really lovely to see all the participants and from all the very diverse places that you're all located in. So that's really nice to see. And I just want to reiterate what Adam has said already, that today we're really looking to give you all sort of a broad overview of some of the issues that have been coming up during the last couple of months, or we can even say the last year, and what we found in our clinical practice, and what we found is actually helpful to some of the people that we have been coming into contact with during this time. We would invite you all, if you'd like to use the chat function. That's absolutely fine. You can use that, and you don't have to share very personal things on there. But there will be some interactive elements of this webinar today as well, so you can feel free to just participate as you see fit. We also just want to say, I think it's quite important for us just to say this, that we recognize that this is a very challenging time for many people across the globe right now. And we also recognize that for many of you, you might have been directly or indirectly affected by the pandemic. And we want to say that we're sending you, if necessary, any condolences. And also, we want to empathize with you as well during this time. So we thought that would also just be important to recognize as we begin. So our objectives for our talk today is really to have a think about some of the experiences that you might have been going through during this time, and to think about some of the lessons that we might have learned from the past couple of months. We have heard this word, the new normal, sort of being bandied around a lot. And we've also heard terms like this unprecedented time, and that this pandemic has called for us to adjust and to adapt to this new normal. And really what it's called for is it's called for us to actually build our resilience And the word resilience, what it ultimately means is it's our ability to be able to bounce back from very challenging circumstances. And so how can we actually go about learning to bounce back? And how can we look forward despite the fact that we're still in a current situation where there's a lot of uncertainty and we're all not really knowing really how to actually go ahead and take the steps that we need to do. And sometimes it might even seem that we're going a little bit backwards at times. And we just want to start off by just thinking about some of the changes that we have already started to or that we have been experiencing. And of course, we all know that the current situation, COVID-19, has called for us to really live in a very different way compared to what we used to live. So the old normal, the way things, how things used to be. And of course, it's also called for us to work in different ways. And that, of course, has called for adaptation and resilience as well. And of course, we know about all the restrictions and the impact that this has had on people as well. And of course, we know that this is having quite an impact on people's mental health and well-being generally. The fact that they can't really move around freely, that they might be making plans to do things, but they keep these plans keep having to change all the time. They're not being able to connect with people. They're not able to connect with family and have the social connections that they used to. And this, of course, is all having a negative impact upon mental health. So we're seeing some negative mental health outcomes coming through with that. For some people, the last couple of months have also caused, it has resulted in people really having to sort of slow down and to do things differently. And it's also caused a lot of introspection. So people are starting to think about the fact that they're having to look inward. And for some people, that's actually been a time of growth and a time of development, because they're actually thinking about how they can do things differently. They're reassessing their situations, and they're trying to think in more creative and innovative ways about how they want to work and about how they want to live. But at the same time, this forced kind of slowdown and this forced kind of introspection is also causing a lot of people to grapple with a lot of their own cognitions and their own thoughts. And this is also then starting to fuel some anxiety and even some depression in people, because coupled with the fact that they have difficulty with the social restrictions and lack of connection and all of that. And of course, we know that one of the major things that affects our mental health during this time is the fact that there is, can you just please go back to the previous slide? Is the fact that there is uncertainty and lack of clarity during this time. As human beings, we thrive on having some sort of certainty. It makes us feel safe. But at the moment, we are in a situation where, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of thinking, okay, things are changing. 2020 is over. Everybody was kind of looking forward to 2021. They had high hopes, and I'm sure some of you might have had this. I know I did have high hopes. I said, okay, 2021, as we were coming into it, a lot of people were very optimistic about it. But I think now we've gotten to a little bit of a slump again, and we've seen this sort of second wave, and we've seen the difficulties that are coming up with this and the new challenges that it's presenting. And the fact that we can't always control the things that are happening around us is that source of anxiety. It's creating that source of anxiety and having to come to terms not only with a new reality, but with a constantly evolving and changing reality. It's changing all the time. But as I said before, we want to look for that certainty, and we want to look for that kind of constancy. And we like structure, of course. We thrive on structure. And right now, because we're not having that structure, it's fueling this sense of anxiety and the sense of fear as well. And so we're constantly having to learn how to re-engage during the pandemic from time to time and reassess the situation and constantly think about how we're actually going to adapt to the ever-changing circumstances. So the first thing I just want you to do, if you're comfortable, just go back. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to in the chat box, if you can just put down it could be just any general ideas that you're having in terms of some of the changes that you might have encountered during this time, the major impactful ones, the majorly significant ones. And we're not going to read all of the answers out, but if you can, it'll be great if we can have some answers in there, and then we can just get an understanding of some of the major changes that people have had to adapt to. Okay. Right. So working from home, being unfit, not seeing family is a huge one. Not being, oh yeah, that social connection, I think that's a huge thing. Such an important element. Loss of employment, yeah. Simplifying life in all ways. And that can be a good thing. Of course, it can also be a quite a negative thing for many people. Being made redundant. Okay. Sleep pattern off. Yeah. So we can see that there's so many challenges that people are facing during this time. Quite a diverse array of difficulties that people are going through. And I see a significant number of you are actually mentioning this kind of social connection and that social disconnection rather from the people that you care about and that would usually be your source of support. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Okay, we can move on to the next slide now, please. Okay, so I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this idea of there being this first wave that we saw just in terms of the spike in cases and the incidents and the numbers, and we were constantly always being exposed to this idea of how many new cases, how many deaths, this is in the media every day. We're seeing this, but then of course we know we are now in this kind of second wave. So we're in a second wave right now. And people are even talking about the fact that we might encounter a further wave, a third wave. And very much like this diagram shows us here with this sort of like this curve, and we see that there is an increase in the number of cases and it's maybe a slight plateau, and then it peaked at that point and then it went down again. Very much like this, we can also think about our mental health being like this as well. And we can compare our mental health and our well-being to really go to this idea of going up in peaks and in valleys. So sometimes we're actually, as things start to improve, as we're starting to adjust and to adapt and getting used to a new way of life, we develop some hope in us and we start to say, okay, I'm adapting right now, things are getting okay, but then something might happen and then we might start going down again into that slump, and we might then go into a valley as well. And when we get into that valley, it can sometimes be quite difficult to actually come back again and to rise and to develop a sense of hope again. Okay, and so we also recognize that during this time, in the beginning phases, it was very much about survival. People were very survival, concerned about the fact that they needed to protect themselves and their families. And now again, it seems to be going into that kind of survival mode again, as we've reached this peak. And again, that has strong implications for our mental health and for our coping mechanisms. So just to bear that in mind as well, and just for you to have a reflective moment about, there might have been times along the last year where you felt, okay, yes, I am quite hopeful during this time, but again, my mental health has taken a little bit of a dip. And we just want to say that it's okay and that it's normal for you to go through those periods of time as well. But of course, it's more concerning when you start to stay in that valley and you don't start to rise up again. So you can move on to the next slide, Resha, please. Okay, so this brings us on to what we can start to do a little bit differently during this time. And we as mental health professionals, we are very focused on the idea that a lot of our emotions and our behaviors are affected by the way that we view things and by the way that we think about things. So with the current situation, you might find that you have been having a particular mindset about some of the issues that are going on around you. So this particular diagram shows us that different people might react differently to different situations. And this in turn has an impact upon their emotional state, upon their emotional well-being, and then in terms of how they behave and in terms of what they actually do. So for example, the problem might be the same. So we might have this problem of COVID-19 and is making people sick all over the world. Now, a person with a fixed mindset might adopt this idea that I am scared and worried about what is happening, and it is totally out of my control. And this sort of fixed mindset can be quite rigid, and it can be quite closed off and have us feeling quite fixed and set in our way around this idea. And this is actually it is contrast to the idea of a growth mindset. And we're not saying that you have to adopt this all the time, but we're saying there might be certain circumstances in your life where actually it's helpful for you to think about, when you're getting in a fixed mindset, what might be an alternative way of viewing this. So a growth mindset might be, I can actually stay well informed about the situation to understand how it impacts me and my family. I can focus on what is in my direct control. I can't control everything around me for certain, but in my direct locus of control, I can control my thinking and I can control my emotions and my behavior. And so I can look at the news and make sure that what I'm actually doing is monitoring my news intake. I'm looking around me and seeing what I need to keep safe, but I'm not necessarily getting absorbed in that and getting totally directed by that completely. So that's a growth mindset. And then even further on from a growth mindset might be an innovation mindset. And you might have heard of some stories in the news, you might have heard of different things of people adopting this innovation mindset where they're actually going a step further and they're taking the information that's coming through during this time and they're dealing with the crises and the difficulties during this time, but they're trying to make the most of the situation. And how they're actually doing that is they're saying, okay, what particular skills and resources and talents and abilities do I have as a person? And how can I use those skills, talents, and abilities to make the most of the situation? How can I contribute not only to my direct circle, but how can I actually go a little bit further and help society and help just help this current situation, the current pandemic right now? So I don't know if any of you have seen in the news. So for example, there might be just innovative ways around technologies. Technology is a huge way of actually there's so many innovative things that have come up now with technology. And then just in terms of, I don't know if you want to put in the chat box if you can think of any other innovative things. So people are doing things around just the protective gear, around masks. We know some small businesses are actually trying to come up during this time with an innovative mindset as well, just in terms of how they do things differently and to capitalize on the current experiences that are happening right now. And then just as a quick another example, so just to highlight these different mindsets again, you might have the situation is that we're being asked to practice social distancing, and a fixed mindset might be, I have to stay indoors and do nothing. And again, this is kind of becoming very rigid in your thinking and just focusing on a very negative aspect of this. But a growth mindset is saying, actually, let me think, this is a situation, I can't really change the situation, and try to think about what I can actually do to get around this and what are the different things that I can try. And then an innovative mindset, again, is going a step further and saying, actually, this gives me the opportunity to help people do things differently and to think in a more creative way. I see somebody's written, some lovely ideas coming. So new innovative companies about environmental things, absolutely. Trying to learn a new instrument and language online, yeah, absolutely, great. And volunteer work as well. Yes, that's come up as a huge thing as well. Great. Okay. And while we're on the topic of mindsets and thinking, we just wanted to highlight to you all today as well this idea of thinking traps, because in the field of psychology, we talk a lot about thinking traps or even thinking errors or thinking mistakes that we often fall into. And so you might find that actually from time to time, you might be engaging in some of these thinking traps. And it's important to actually monitor and be aware, because these things can then affect your mood as well. So if you just go onto Google and you look for thinking traps, you'll actually find many, many resources. And this diagram only highlights just a few of them, but actually there are many thinking traps that you can fall into. So for example, you might engage in black and white thinking. So this is a tendency to think in extreme terms, all or nothing thinking. This pandemic is never going to end. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. This always happens to me. So this is, as I say, it's very, very extreme types of thinking. So it's important to monitor and to be aware of when you're actually engaging in this type of thinking. What's also happening now quite a lot during the pandemic is fortune telling. A lot of people are trying to predict the future. They're saying, actually, this is a huge mess that's going on. How much longer is this going to carry on? I've heard people say 2021 is already a write-off. This is all terrible. So again, if you find yourself engaging in these types of thinking, remember to just pause and to say, actually, this type of thinking is not going to be really helpful to me. And take more of an observer stance in your thinking. So you might say, oh, I notice I'm having the thought that, I notice I'm having this thinking trap, and then take a step further back and say, I noticed that I'm having this particular thought, And therefore, you can then either challenge this thought, or you can let this thought go, or you can think of an alternative way of actually dealing with this negative thought rather than fueling it. And one of the things which is quite helpful as well is just to keep a journal or to keep a diary, and just to monitor when during each day, actually, when you're engaging in these different types of thinking traps and thinking errors. And catastrophizing is another one that's coming up quite a lot as well. Okay, so you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so how do we manage these thinking traps, you might ask yourself. So the first step is actually to notice that you're actually having the thoughts, and then to start asking yourself, what is the worst possible situation? And a lot of the times we think in a very catastrophic way. We think in that black and white way, and we think worst possible outcome. And so it's okay to imagine that worst possible outcome. But then the next step after that is actually to envision the best outcome, because we often forget that actually there is another element to it as well. And then to bring in a sense of rationality into this and consider what is most likely to happen. And then from there, you develop a realistic scenario of how you're actually going to deal with this, how you're going to tackle with this, and what's going to help your problem solving during this time, rather than getting sucked into this very dark hole of just getting into a very negative space. And it's also very important to monitor how you talk to yourself as well, because that also contributes towards these thinking traps. Often we engage in very, very negative self-talk. And we as psychologists and counselors, we often say to the people that we work with, how would you actually talk to somebody that you're advising? How would you talk to your friend? And it's amazing. Sometimes we come up with the best and most wonderful solutions when we're giving advice to other people. But when we're caught in our own heads, it becomes very, very difficult to actually envision that and to actually help ourselves. So getting help from other people, but also talking to ourselves in a positive way is also very important. And also, just what is also very important is also to let those thoughts go as well. So it's really about striking the right balance. And this is where we are at right now. And we've got some people who are in the camp that are, yes, I just want things to go back to the old normal now. I just want the way things to be the way that they were. And the thing is that it's quite difficult for us to actually get back to that state right now. So you've got other people who are saying that I hope that we can actually keep some of the things that we did, because actually there have been some benefits to the current experience. They've been hard to find in a lot of cases, but actually the way that we work, the way that we collaborate with people right now, we might be able to take these strategies on and go forward with that innovative mindset. And then, of course, yes, we've got this window of opportunity. Let's change everything. We don't have to go to that extreme either, but we can maybe strike that balance of, okay, we want to reach a state of structure and certainty and feeling a little bit more secure with things, but maybe there are elements that we can also include just in terms of helping us and the lessons that we've learned from what we have gone through right now. You can move on to the next slide. Okay, and then just to reiterate what I've spoken about in terms of the thinking, it's really important to take that step of just saying, I acknowledge the thoughts that I'm having, and a lot of the times to let those thoughts go. We have, during the day, on average, we have 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts in a day, but we don't give focus to every single thought that comes through our mind. And that is really important. We tend to focus on the very negative thoughts. And the important thing is to be able to let go of those thoughts and to see them almost like passengers that get onto a bus. They get onto a bus, they can be noisy, they can try to redirect the driver and distract the driver. But actually, we don't have to pay attention to those noisy, disruptive passengers. They will eventually get off the bus, and the bus driver will keep moving in the direction that he needs to be moving. Similarly, you can see your thoughts as leaves going down a stream, or you could even see your thoughts as clouds in the sky passing by. And you don't have to cling onto each and every thought and focus on every thought. And so mindfulness, breathing, yoga, meditation, these are all very important things to be doing during times like this. Thank you, Resha.
Thank you, Prathna. So I'll be talking a little bit more about resiliency and how we can incorporate resiliency into our lives. So moving forward, beyond what we have experienced in 2020, this diagram is really one of my favorites. What this diagram reminds me of is a book that I read in December. It's called Ikigai. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, but basically this book outlines a lot of studies that have been done on the Japanese population, on the sense of long life and longevity that they've had. They call them centenarians, and they have studied what makes the Japanese population be the longest living and the healthiest. So they have discovered 4 components that you see in this diagram. And it's really these people, whenever they finish work or retire, they don't think that their life is over. They develop something else that they love, that's something that they're good at, and something that possibly they could be paid for, even if they're not, and something that their immediate community or the world needs. And the combination of all those 4 factors is their calling, it's their purpose. And that is what they call Ikigai. So I found that quite wonderful. And, you know, maybe thinking about this opportunity is your current career right now, or what you're doing, does it give you those 4 elements? Because we very well know in mental health that finding meaning and purpose is related to mental well-being, and it is related to feeling content with my path in life. So I want you to reflect on for a minute, what lessons can we learn from this experience of 2020 and from the current experience, and what tools and skills we have possibly picked up. So you can use the chat box to answer, and Adam, you can feel free to read the answers.
Thanks, Resha. Just unmuting myself there, so I'll answer as people start to put some comments in.
Sure.
I'm sure they're typing away just now. Lessons learned. What really matters in life? So maybe perspective. That person's thinking.
For sure, perspective. And we'll talk about perspective in a little, in a few slides, actually. So I'm going to move on to talk about a personal model of resilience. There's different types of models out there, but first I want to pose to you a question. I think maybe you have paid attention to the definition posed by Prathna, but how do you personally understand resilience? If you have an idea, just type your answers and Adam can read. So the way I understand resilience personally is just that ability or that I have it in me to bounce back after a difficulty, to be successful after going through some adversity or challenging times, that it doesn't break me, you know, that kind of like being thick-skinned, that you learn, absorb, and you can move on. That's the way I look at it.
So Resha, we've got some answers that I think reflect that. So some people have said ability to withstand change, ability to cope with a negative situation, knowing when to be kind to yourself, being able to adapt in every situation and to learn from experiences. These are some of the examples that are coming through.
Wonderful. So yes, we all can tailor our own definition of resilience. This personal model talks about 3 elements: the strengths I recognize I have from the situation or from my personal strengths, or the strategies that I have found helpful to deal with in challenging times. So for example, I think it's a broken record that we as psychologists talk about routine and work-life balance. It's really important to have that, especially in difficult times, especially that our lives have changed dramatically since the beginning of 2020. So having strategies that you found helpful during challenging times and continuing those will definitely have a positive effect. And the third element is increasing your sense of engagement. So knowing who are your sources of support. And the past has made us think about, oh, maybe we have some friends we've disconnected with. Maybe we can reach out to more people. We've had Zoom meetings and parties and gatherings, and it's really helped us to reach out against time zones and against different countries, where I imagine this wasn't something that we really thought about in our busy daily schedules before the pandemic hit. I know for sure that was true for me, that I connected with old friends. So if you think about these things for you, just make a mental note or make a note of your own. What are your strengths? What strategies you find helpful? And what sources of support? This is your model of resilience. Another model of resilience talks about it in the sense of different components. So challenge. So it's the idea that you look at the problem or the adversity as temporary. It's just a minor or a temporary setback that you can overcome, and you see it as a difficult situation. It's a challenge, but it's not the end all or something that would break you. And it's also having the commitment to pursue your purpose and goals regardless of the challenge. And it's really precisely the reason why you keep going every day and you get up and you stay true to your commitments with people, in relationships, your beliefs, your values, and the real causes that you care about, as well as a sense of personal control. That's very important for resiliency. So resilient people tend to actually most of the time just focus on their efforts on what they can control, and they don't waste their energy in things that they have no control over, because obviously that increases stress, it lowers our confidence, absorbs energy. So that's something that we will talk a little bit more about. So I found this really cool video online, and I'd like to share it with you. It talks about resilience strategies during COVID.
There are many different reactions that we may experience in the face of adversity. Anger, frustration, worry, sadness, helplessness. You may be experiencing all these reactions at different times and in different ways. Remember that it's okay to not be okay. And it's also okay to be okay. Feeling tired, frustrated, and disappointed doesn't mean that you aren't coping well. And feeling hopeful or optimistic doesn't mean that you're naive. It means that you're paying attention to your thoughts and feelings. Our internal landscape shapes the way we view and interact with the world around us. Even at the best of times, humans are hardwired to notice threats and weaknesses. During difficult times, it is more important than ever to find balance by recognizing the things that are still going well. Acknowledge all the amazing work that you're doing for the patients in your community. See the positive examples of humanity all around us. Seeking this balance is not with the intention of eliminating feelings that are uncomfortable, difficult, or scary, or to invalidate the significance or weight of what is challenging right now. It is so that you can create space to also allow other experiences and emotions to be present and unfold, particularly the ones that may be more soothing, balancing, or energizing. You can choose where you focus your attention. Direct your attention to the aspects of your life that you have control over or can influence. Our brains tend to get us stuck trying to fix the areas of life that we can't actually control, which often leaves us feeling frustrated, discouraged, and depleted. I know this is easier said than done. Sometimes a helpful first step is to give voice to it. Say out loud or even write down if the worry or situation that has left you feeling stuck is one that you do or do not have control over. When we give ourselves permission to recognize and let go of what we can't control, we're empowered to direct our energy towards other areas of life that we also value and can influence. While adverse events are painful and difficult, they don't have to determine the outcome of your life. There are many aspects of your life you can control, modify, and grow during challenging times. That's the role of resilience. Becoming more resilient not only helps to find ways to get through these difficult times, but also empowers you to grow and even improve your life along the way. Choose where you focus your intention and also tune into the good that is happening in our world. Maintain your connections. Seek out the people and activities that enrich your life. Focus on what matters and what you can control. Step away from the things that lead you to become more upset or worried, especially circumstances you cannot change, and shift your attention to the things that you can influence. The most important thing to remember is that you're not alone on this journey. We may not always make the right choices along the way, so practice self-compassion as we all continue to figure out how to adapt to our ever-changing circumstances. While you may not be able to control every situation in your life right now, you can grow to create a more positive space by focusing on the aspects that you can influence with the support of loved ones, team members, and other professionals in the community.
So I hope that you found that useful. I really like this. Oops, sorry.
Anger, ready to be okay.
I apologize. I need to switch back.
Feeling tired, frustrated,
the PowerPoint.
and disappointed doesn't mean
I'm not sure how to get back to the screen. Sorry, just bear with us 1 minute.
Resha, if you try pressing escape, it might work. Okay.
All right, sorry. All right, sorry about that technological glitch on my part, and we'll pick up where I left off. So something that we can talk about regarding all these wonderful strategies that were shared with us in the video of what I can and cannot control, again, to remind you, is you can only control what happens today and now. So focusing on the present, as Prathna said, mindfulness practice is a wonderful way that resilient people can carry forward. We can definitely look at planning for the future, but I think 2020 has definitely taught us that we can't overplan because that's not within our control. So thinking about after a period of quarantine or isolation, you obviously might have some negative feelings, but also you may recognize that after it finishes and after the restrictions have lifted, you have some sense of relief and gratitude. So even if you're feeling aware of those things, I want you to actually make a mental note of them. Something that we do for our students and clients is encourage them to build a gratitude practice within their day. So something you can do is one time a day, either in the morning or at night. Personally, I do it at night. I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. They could be general things like maybe you took a nice walk or you enjoyed a meal or you saw a friend, but I like to also make them more personal. So maybe you using the chat box, you can talk about one thing that you're grateful for. I like to make it more personal because it gets me to think about how I'm coping. So maybe I pushed myself to go for a walk, or maybe I made an effort and reached out to a friend. That will help me look into my own achievements. So if we have any answers, Adam, you can read them.
Certainly we have one so far, which is a lady said, my husband, and I think that's so true from my perspective as well. The support of family at this time is so important for me on a personal level. Someone else says they're grateful for their family and the support that they're giving each other, and I think that's really nice. Family support, again, having balance, friends and teammates. For me, Resha, as well, if I could just jump in, I think time to reflect sometimes. I'm really grateful for that. Having that time to write down things or to reflect and be grateful. Grateful for friends who check up on one another. Lots of things in here.
For sure. So a lot of you have noted connections and engagement, and that's definitely something that has pulled us through difficult times. So the other element or strategy is thinking about reorganizing your priorities. So definitely 2020 and still we're in this struggle together has been making us really look at what's important in our lives. We can think about crises as bringing opportunities for improvement. And it's not always that it's negative. Opportunities for improvement in our own self or even for growth or for innovation, like Prathna had said. There's a term that we coined in psychology that talks about post-traumatic growth, the personal growth that someone experiences after a traumatic event. So that's definitely something that's been studied, and we are capable of growing to be stronger, better versions of ourselves during difficult times. So it's important to focus on our priorities. Having said that, I do hope that your mental health and your emotional health is one of those priorities. And I think we've all probably known people that have struggled with their mental or emotional health more recently during the difficult times we've all faced. As a clinical counselor, also working at a clinic, I've seen a huge surge in requests for appointments. And so it's obviously connected to the pandemic and how that has affected our lives. But it's more importantly thinking, okay, maybe this is a window for me to talk to a therapist. Maybe I'm, need to optimize my self-care or continue or reinvent self-care strategies. Maybe what I'm doing is not enough for the level of stress I'm going through. So I want you to think about your abilities, your strengths, and seeking support to have a stable and stable emotional and mental health. Okay. This really talks about accepting negative emotions. So when we're going through difficult times, of course, we're going to experience fear and anxiety, as stated earlier. We're going to experience depression or maybe even low confidence, worry about the future, all of that. The idea is, because we can't control these, the best thing we can do for resiliency is to acknowledge them, to acknowledge that these thoughts and anxious emotions will show up during time, to accept them rather than try to fight them or avoid them, because they certainly don't go away. The best thing is we sit with them, okay? So we let them kind of be felt, but at the same time, we don't sulk in them. We don't let them consume us. So it's becoming aware without having them consume us. And the second important step after that awareness is expressing your emotions in a meaningful way, in an adaptive way. Now, we all know friends and colleagues that may express their emotions maybe through numbing, through binge watching TV, or through emotional eating. But we're talking about more adaptive, positive strategies, things like writing or music. So I want you to think about one healthy way to express your own personal emotions and see if you can share it on the chat box. So I mentioned writing. So personally, I keep a daily journal. Sometimes I just write 2 words in the journal, and other days I have a whole page to fill from everything that I've been going through. So that's one way that I express my emotions, and it certainly feels like a sense of relief after. Adam, are there any answers?
Yeah, we have one answer here of drawing, which I think is a nice one.
Drawing.
Poetry
yeah,
is
drawing.
something.
Mm-hmm.
I usually binge watch something, is something someone said.
Yeah.
Someone else has said prayer.
Prayer.
A short walk.
Art. Mm-hmm.
Walk, picking up litter in a neighborhood, making things better.
Yeah, definitely. Being useful, volunteering, creative pursuits, arts, coloring, painting, singing, movement, dance, any form of expressive way that we can deal with our negative energy and our emotions. That does not hurt us, by the way. All right, and of course, we cannot talk about resiliency if we can't mention or forget to mention routines. And we talk about creating new routines that are more adaptive, because perhaps the older routines we had no longer work for us. Many of us continue to work online or study online, and therefore remote working. So maybe we're not going into the office as much. That might interfere with our routine. So be mindful of over relying on distraction strategies, like, maybe over watching TV or binging, numbing, avoidance strategies that really don't allow us to experience our emotions, but they actually just are avoidance if overused. And studies have shown that actually planning and executing new routines that connect you to what really matters in your life are the best recipes for emotional and mental health. So it's really important to establish structure, predictability, and a sense of purpose. You know what's coming, and add that to your new routine going forward. And we're still in February, so there's tons of time for us to develop those new routines. So maybe type in or share with us one thing that you would like to add to your daily routine in the chat box. I can tell you that since the pandemic started, one thing that I have included in my new routine is stretching. Stretching, sometimes I go as far as do 15 minutes of yoga, but even if I don't have time and I feel like I need to rush through my day, I just take 2 minutes to just move my body and stretch and hear the cracks and feel better when I am stretching. So that's something that I've kept up, and I'm proud of that. Adam, did you get any answers?
Yeah, we have some daily exercise, a walk, some short daily exercise, some cycling, exercise, and gratefulness. Switching off all screens earlier before bed. I think I could learn from that one. Gardening, yeah. Some really nice ones. Online art meetup. So there's some really different ones in here as well.
Yeah, wonderful. And these are all great ideas. It's about developing something that works for you and integrating it into a new routine. Maybe it's sleeping in half an hour because you don't have to drive to work, but it's also adding, bedtime reading instead of looking at the screen at night. So whatever works for you. So that takes us obviously into generally talking about prioritizing not just mental and emotional health, but also self-care. So obviously, you know very well that there's been a bunch of studies and science has backed up the positive effects of exercise on emotional health and good nutrition and having a healthy diet, because definitely food affects how we feel in general. Staying connected and engaged makes us feel supported and directly linked to our emotional well-being. So taking time to slow down. I know we continue to be in a fast-paced world, but taking time to breathe and slow down, reflect and connect to what is really important for us and our priorities. I think if anything we've learned in the past year and we're continuing to learn is we can't control the future, and what's really important for us in our life is to focus on. All right, thank you for being a part of our presentation. These are some useful resources that could be helpful to you in case you want to look into resiliency some more. These are 2 books that we found are helpful as well. Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Resha and Prathna. I think on a personal level, I've picked up a lot from that presentation and your expert advice, and I think I'll certainly be letting go of some of my cloud thoughts and practicing gratitude a lot more, and your insight into some of the ways we can cope with some of the challenges we all have at the moment and become more resilient was really beneficial. So thank you both very much. I think we should now open it up to our alumni community to ask any questions. We've got just over 5 minutes to do that now, so if you do have any questions, please do put them into the Q&A box or into the chat box, preferably the Q&A one, and I'll manage them from there. We do have one just to begin with, which I'll put to you both, and perhaps one of you can take it. So do you have any strategies for dealing with subconscious negative thoughts that are random, for example, while trying to fall asleep? So you might have covered this a little bit already, but let's open with that question, which was submitted earlier.
Mm-hmm. Prathna, I think this is something down your alley, but I just wanted to share a personal experience that I do. So I tend to be an overthinker as well. And something that I do that really helps me to quiet my mind at night is I play a sleep podcast or a sleep music, and I just focus all my attention on it. And as long as there's something external I'm focused my attention on, I'm less likely to storm off on my own thoughts. Prathna?
I just want to acknowledge that I think the nighttime is particularly problematic because that's the time when we slow down completely and we don't have all the things around us to distract us and to absorb our minds in. And so when we slow down completely, we're kind of faced with the reality of, oh my goodness, these are all the thoughts that I have to deal with. And that can be really overwhelming. And that's why I think finding some time outside of that, because, well, first of all, I would encourage having sort of a bedtime or a nighttime ritual and routine. I think that's really important. Winding down, making sure you're relaxed, doing some meditation or listening to a podcast and winding down in that way. But also just in terms of dealing with those negative thoughts, I think that's where journaling and, just acknowledging those thoughts. So having some time even during the day where you have that time of, some people call it even worry time, or some scheduled time to actually think about and do some problem solving around those thoughts and writing them down. And I know I'm going on about journaling a lot, but from my experience with my clients and the students that I've been working with, they found it immensely helpful just to write it down. And even just in terms of the connections in your brain, as you write things down, you are able to actually make better sense of what you're actually going through. And then as you write them down, you can think of, okay, this is actually not such a rational thought, or this is completely irrational. And then you can think of some strategies of actually dealing with that in that way. So finding some particular time to actually deal with those thoughts, I think is helpful as well. And exactly that, just winding down and helping yourself to relax and turn off some of that thinking.
Okay. I think one that's probably linked to that, and someone's asking, there's a lot of negativity around it. We've been talking about a lot of that, negative people, negative media, negative environments. How do we take ourselves away from that and cope with that? Maybe that's what you've just said. Is it taking space to think about that and reflect about it, or is there another way we can deal with it?
I think boundaries are really important. Time boundaries are really important. I know we were all probably, turning on the news, watching the newest update, staying tuned on social media and Facebook. And we're always looking to be safe and to update our information on what's going on in the world and what's going on locally. But I think there has to be times where we allocate that towards the day and not have it be consuming our entire time. There is a lot of negativity that comes from outside. And if I need to create a safe place and a protected space for me to focus on my other job or my responsibilities, then the way I do that is allocate like a few minutes in the morning if I want to catch up on negative news or deal with something even that's negative, or something later in the evening, but not just have it interrupt my day, if that makes sense.
Great. Okay. I'd invite anyone else who has any more questions just to put them into the Q&A box or into the chat box at this moment in time. I've occasionally used apps as well, like Headspace, and I've found them quite useful just to dip in and out of. And I suppose just from a slightly different angle, what's your opinion of those? Do you think those are good tools to utilize?
Headspace, I personally use it, and I often recommend it to my students and my clients. There are tons of apps out there. If you're looking, we can make recommendations as well. And new ones that came up last year as a result of the pandemic. The wonderful thing about those apps is they organize meditation into your routine. They track it, they teach you how to meditate, and they're really simple to use. And you can choose the time that you want to meditate for, like 3 minutes, 5, 10, and yeah. So definitely, Adam, I love that app personally.
Great. And you've shared some other resources there, which I think we can and we should share with the attendees and some of our alumni community afterwards, and some of the book recommendations that people have been asking about as well. I think that's great, and I think we're almost up for time. So I think we will have some space for people to ask some more questions over the next few minutes. But I think at this stage, I'd like to thank our speakers. So Prathna and Resha, thank you very much indeed again for your insights into how we can cope with this challenging time as individuals and collectively and support one another. And I think there's been some really practical advice that we can all take away. So thank you both for your time this afternoon. We really, really do appreciate it, and all the support that you give our students and everyone else on the Dubai campus. So thank you. I would also like to... Sorry.
I was just saying thanks for having us.
It's a real pleasure having you both. Thank you. We'd also like to recognise our alumni team who have coordinated today's event, and especially our colleague Catherine Taylor, who's the Alumni Engagement Officer in Dubai. So if you are based in Dubai, please do feel free to give her a shout or get in touch with her. She's put an awful lot of work into coordinating today's session, so thank you, Catherine. And if you want to get in touch with the What Club, you can at any point. We have a range of events coming up, but we're also looking for new ideas for webinars. So if you would like to provide an idea, or if you would even like to speak or volunteer for a webinar, please do get in touch, and you can get in touch with us at our email address, which is what.club@hw.ac.uk. And we do have an event that's coming up, which is a university-wide event, which I thought might be of interest, and just to highlight to everyone today, it's part of our Hutton series on climate change, and that's coming up on the 9th of March. And this is a series of events that's taking place across last year and this year to address, with one simple aim really, to identify 10 key priorities, innovations and actions that we can take as a society to mitigate the climate crisis. And they're pulling together experts from lots of different sectors to discuss that issue, and inviting comment and input from alumni, staff, students and the general public. So please do have a look at that and attend if you can. So thank you again to our speakers and to you, all of our attendees. It's been a really useful event, and we hope that you can attend one of our events in the future. Resha, I think you've kindly agreed to stay on for a couple of minutes longer, just in case anyone has any other general questions. Sure. But at this point, I'd like to say thank you all, and have a good evening, afternoon and day.